Now, I know in the last few lessons, we wrote a lot of Firebase code that was really conceptual and also kind of nitty-gritty. We had to use a lot of Firebase functions and a lot of things that we ended up removing because we were just simply trying to dynamically update our collections using code rather than manually entering each of these into our Firestore. But along the way, it was really valuable because we learned how to set values inside of our Firestore as well as create new documents and create new collections. Exactly our collections collection. Now, in case anyone is still confused about what we did and what we're trying to do by moving this data into Firestore, I actually have a quick little diagram that will show you what we did and what we need to do moving forward as well, from a just conceptual level. In this diagram here, what we have is this section that represents our Firestore, and then this section, which represents our actual front-end Crown Clothing e-commerce application. How we originally had it before, and kind of how we actually still have it now, is that we have our application itself, we have our Redux, right? And inside of our Redux, we have our shop reducer. Inside of our shop reducer and our front-end application as a whole, we have our shop data stored as a file. We then pass that into our reducer when we instantiate it, and we set that shop data as the initial value of the initial state. In our last lesson, we moved our dynamic shop data into Firestore. And why is it dynamic? Well, the data in our Firestore database is ever-changing because it can be changed by anyone who has administrative access. If they wanted to update our Firestore, they would be able to do so. Let's say, for example, the management team of our e-commerce platform wants to introduce a new spring collection or a new watch collection. Well, it would be really easy for them to just update data or upload new data into the database, and then any application that needs that data can just pull from it. Right now, what we're doing inside of our application is we are simply using the shop data file to store the data and then pulling it into our shop reducer by importing it in and setting as the initial value. So this, if let's say management tells us they want new things, we'd have to manually update the shop data file. And this is ineffective because we want to be able to deploy our code and not have to worry. Especially because if you imagine there's multiple applications, we have our web application, we have a mobile application, they all want to rely on the same data. If new collections come out, we should not have to update it manually in two different places. The two places being one, our actual front-end application, and two, in the mobile application. Instead, what we did was move it into Firestore, and now what we need to do is we need to use our front-end application code and pull this data down from Firestore, and then add it to our Redux shop reducer dynamically, instead of instantiating it with this static shop data that we have right now. So we want to get rid of that, and essentially just pull this data down in from Firestore into our application. And by doing that, we're now able to listen for Firestore changes whenever this data updates so that our application always has the newest data. We're still going to store this data inside of our shop reducer, but we just have to think about how we're going to do this. And we'll talk about all of this in the next lesson. Right now, though, this is just a quick image that hopefully clears up what it is that we were trying to do. So in the next lesson, we're going to do this portion where we now bring this data from Firestore into our application and then store it into Redux. And this is a very common pattern you're going to see in any application. So let's do that in the next lesson.